Hey, welcome back to the Old Gravy Podcast. Today's episode, I'm going to give you the title. I rarely do this, but I'm going to do it today. And the title of this episode is Death to America, Now Pay Off My College Loan. So that's a mouthful right there, but we're going to go deep into it. We're going to talk about what's going on college campuses. And we're all aware this is the Israel, Hamas, Palestine, Gaza. You're all been hearing it in the news. But this episode, we're going to do more of we're going to talk about those things, but we're going to do a deep dive about what's really going on college campuses. Now, Old Gravy, and I'll talk in the third person here, I think this is much bigger than Israel and Palestine. And that's what this show is going to be about. We're going to kind of do this deep dive on college campuses. And we're going to come at you in a lot of different directions, but I think you're going to enjoy it. But before I get to that, I got to cover some business. So today's show is sponsored by InspectMySmartHome.com. Do not buy a smart home unless you have a technical smart home inspector to review the network components of your dream home. It's not just your security system. The modern smart home is an IP network that controls locks, doors, shades, lighting, HVAC systems, and pool equipment. You got to make sure all these components are tested and functional and find out how old your system is. So before you buy a smart home, you need to have this type of inspections. Smart home is software, and replacing and upgrading smart home software can cost you thousands of dollars for upgrades, replacements. So you have to tell your real estate broker, I'm not going to close on this house till I contact InspectMySmartHome.com. Realtors, don't let your clients purchase a smart home without contacting InspectMySmartHome.com or call 888-668-4410, 888-668-4410, InspectMySmartHome.com. So let's get back to the topic of the show, and that is what's going on these college campuses, these elite institutions of learning. That's what they refer to themselves. I mean, I don't know how, well, they are elite. I just don't know how much learning is going to go on, and we're going to dig into that too. I'll tell you right now, what I think is going on campuses is a lot bigger than these privileged smart kids searching for a cause. We're going to cover a lot of things on these modern day campuses, and this has been coming for a long time. And the big thing when we go into this show, this is not going to just be a show about the Israel-Palestinian conflict. It's going to be bigger than that, and we're going to go back in time, and we're really going to review some of the culture and some of the activities and what has happened to the modern day college campus. And we're going to dig into that. And I have to do it with my guest. And my guest just came in from Florida, and he just arrived to be on the show. I have King George joining me from Florida. Welcome to the show, King George.
It's great to be here, Old Gravy.
Well, I'd love to have you because one thing, I always say this. One thing about my guests is they have a lot of expertise in life. And I always say they've done a lot of living, and that's the type of guest I'd like to have. And I'm going to give you a little bit of King George's background. He's an entrepreneur. He's a technologist. He was my personal psychologist. He was my business partner. He's college roommate. So we got a lot of history here. And the fact that we've shared a collegiate experience, and we're going to go kind of compare and contrast what the campuses look like today and what they looked like when we were back on campus. That's kind of why I wanted to have King George here. King, I'm going to ask you a question. And you don't mind if I just call you King sometimes without using the formality of King George. I know that can upset you at times. I don't know if you remember this, but do you remember back in college? And believe me, we're going to get to the college campus thing. This is a little intimate story between me and King George. Do you remember back in college diagnosing me with ADD?
The exact time, maybe not, but yes, I remember the discussion.
Yeah, well, I remember it very well because I was very insulted. And this is back in the 80s. And
I was before my time, right?
Right. No, you were right in your time because you came up to me and you said, hey, have you ever heard of attention ADD? And I go, no. Yes. And you go, it's attention deficit disorder. And I'm thinking, look at this guy. And then he tells me that I have it. And then I say to him, and both his parents were physicians. And I'm like, look at this guy. He's in college. He's diagnosing people with a disease I've never even heard about. And one thing is, you didn't say you had it, but you said you had been tested for it. And just by you going through the testing, he had already given me a label that I had ADD.
Was I incorrect?
No, you weren't. No,
Okay.
and you're not going to lie to my audience. You failed the test too. You got the same label.
There we go.
But it is interesting that two guys, with ADD, we don't care anymore. It's not like a secret disease or whatever. We built a new technology concept in telecom that had a ton of moving parts. And I'm going to get with a serious question as I take you through this. Lots of moving parts, details, procedures. There was a lot of complexity to our business. And we actually sold that business after 20 years. But this is a question I have for you because I thought about us talking about college and when you diagnosed me. I wonder if when you medicate the ADD brain, and I'm going to talk about boys, not girls. I know more about it affecting boys than girls, but I'm sure it cuts across genders. I wonder if we, in some way, and I know you're interested in this type of stuff, if we short circuit the brain development, maybe naturally the ADD brain copes, redirects, evolves, does different things. Could this medication stifle creativity or rebuilding specialized thinking patterns? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think so. I think if you can avoid drugs, you want to do that at all costs. I mean, I think that there's probably an application for some kids that definitely need it, but I think that it does. I think it does have long-term effects, and they found that exercising and really staying active is also a component that helps with that. And plus, having a brain like that, ADD or ADHD, there's a strength to it also. It's a power also.
It's an asset.
Yeah.
It's a power. And you just wondering if by dulling that part of the brain, and boys should be hyperactive. This need to calm boys down. There's other ways to do it without medicating, but we could probably do a whole show, and neither one of us are experts on this, but we would pretend to be, to entertain our audience, but we'll move off of that. But I just wanted to ask you that after that diagnosis you made many, many years ago. So let's get back to the college campuses. Sure. Let's start with the President Biden's commencement speech at Morehouse College. Now, Morehouse is do you know it's an all men's college? It's historical black university, and it's all men. Mm-hmm. It's one of the last universities or colleges to have it.
All men.
Yeah, there's 4 out there. Hampton and Sydney's one. I don't know who the other 2 are. I just happened to look that up. So President Biden goes there to speak. Were you aware of that? Yeah. He gave the commencement speech. And I don't think, after I heard the speech, you think having the president, it's very important to have the president there. But I think with Joe Biden, I don't think it was, I don't think he was a good invite. I think it wasn't a good idea, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But let's do this. Let's play a little bit of what President Joe Biden had to say to the graduates of Morehouse College.
You start a college just as George Floyd was murdered, and there was a reckoning on race. It's natural to wonder if democracy you hear about actually works for you. What is democracy? If black men are being killed in the street, what is democracy? You have to be 10 times better than anyone else to get a fair shot. And most of all, what does it mean, as we've heard before, to be a black man who loves his country, even if it doesn't love him back in equal measure?
Okay. I think we got enough, and I think the Morehouse, the graduates there, they probably had enough pretty soon. Or maybe they liked it. I don't know. I don't want to speak for them. But you know what? That was a diatribe. And there was a lot of that in that speech. And the definition of a diatribe is bitter and abusive speech. Like these graduation commencements, There's supposed to be speeches that are uplifting, encouraging, inspiring, insightful, informative. I mean, there's a lot of things a commencement speech can be. But this was, you get the traditional mumbling and stumbling, because he's not a great speaker. I heard he was a great speaker back in the day. I don't see it, but they said back in the day he was a pretty good speaker, but maybe because he was friendly and he did that whole thing, I'm the working class guy. But this was kind of a political, kind of racial, this divisive Democratic stump speech. To me, it wasn't a commencement speech. Were you aware of all the controversies around the speech?
I had heard that before, and it brings you down as opposed to uplifting you. Yeah, I mean, that doesn't love you back. That's not encouraging.
No,
why would someone want that?
Yeah, and he's got a long history of making making bad statements about Black Americans. Obama's clean and articulate. We all know all those, not sending his kids to a racial jungle. And I like repeating them because I like to remind people of what this guy said. And here he is at Morehouse, kind of doing the same thing. Black men are being killed on the street. You have to be 10 times better than everyone else. And what I understand about Morehouse graduates, they make like $10,000 more when they graduate. Their entrance into graduate schools, into medical schools, law schools, that they exceed what the standards are. So it's kind of like, you're talking down to people. Like when he says you got to work 10 times harder. Right? Now, if I was a Morehouse kid sitting there as a graduate, I'd look at that guy, that old white guy up there, and I would say, I only got to be 10 times better than that, and I can be president of the United States. I'd be like, wow,
that's easy.
That's not much of a hurdle. I could be president just by watching what I'm seeing here. But they have all. They've done well at Morehouse and everything, and it's kind of, you had this guy come in to bring you down. I think it's weird that they brought him in because I'll always remember this. Kamala Harris in the primary, right? Debating Joe Biden, and then he would pick her as his VP. She ran right up to the line of calling him a racist. Mm-hmm. Someone might say, well, maybe not a racist, but she definitely called him a bigot.
Right.
And it's just so weird how it's all evolved back that, here he is, he picks her as VP, and then he's at Morehouse telling him like this depressing speech of what the future is going to look like. So I just found it to be a kind of a downer.
Yeah,
a real
downer. It'd be a downer in any time period. It'd be a downer. But especially now, especially with things how they are.
The way the things are. That's a great point. In any time period, you would have been. I remember. Oh, who was ours? We had. Not yours. You're a year behind me. We had Dr. Joyce Brothers, and I remember it was like 95 degrees, and I don't think I ever remembered a word that she said. But I didn't remember that she was putting anyone down or being like, "You're gonna have to do this," and it wasn't negative. It might not have been that interesting. And I was just so happy with my 2.1 to be getting out of there. I might have just been so, I can't believe I made it. So I could have had a different, so what I want to do, we're going to move off the Morehouse speech, but I wanted to bring that up for part of the show. I want to bring up the Kansas City Chiefs star kicker, Harrison Butker. Are you familiar with that?
Yep.
So, he gave a commencement speech at a hardcore Catholic college called St. Benedictine's. St. Benedictine's College is in Kansas. Very small, conservative Catholic college. I had never heard of it before. Have you ever heard of it?
No, I hadn't.
And once again, we're talking about a kicker from the NFL talking at pretty much an unknown school, very small Catholic college out in the middle of Kansas. It's not Morehouse and it's not the president. But the amount of attention this thing got, of what the kicker said, I found fascinating that the media in this country was so interested in it. Not only the media, everything's political now. The people the people that are against certain things. And we're going to pick out a couple of parts of that speech, and I'm going to kind of tell you why they got so riled up and excited about it. The kicker, I'll say this, he knew his audience. That was a very Catholic audience. You know, they have Mass 3 times a day there.
Did not know that.
Yeah, at this little college, they have it. So this kicker, he's not at Berkeley in the Bay out in California. He's not at the Ivy Leagues or NYU or Swarthmore. He's at a very Catholic college. And at times when you listen to his speech, and I'm going to play a clip for you, but I'm going to cover some of the things that he said. He kind of went after the Catholic Church, the institution, that they're cop-outs, that they're cooperating too much, like with society and trying to be hip and cool and get along. And he's saying they're getting away. He was saying they're getting away from what the core belief of the Catholic Church is. Now, listen, he has a right to say it.
Mm-hmm.
If anyone should be upset, it might be some, more establishment Catholics that didn't like it.
Mm-hmm.
But you didn't hear from them. You heard from a specific group. He raked them over the coals a little bit. So now we're going to play what set the left, and I'll call them the left, the media, the DNC, the Democrats, the non-religious, the anti-Christian people. We're gonna play a clip, and let's listen to what he says.
For the ladies present today, congratulations on an amazing accomplishment. You should be proud of all that you have achieved to this point in your young lives. I want to speak directly to you briefly because I think it is you, the women, who have had the most diabolical lies told to you. How many of you are sitting here now, about to cross this stage, and are thinking about all the promotions and titles you are going to get in your career? Some of you may go on to lead successful careers in the world, but I would venture to guess that the majority of you are most excited about your marriage and the children you will bring into this world. I can tell you that my beautiful wife, Isabel, would be the first to say that her life truly started when she began living her vocation as a wife and as a mother. I'm on this stage today and able to be the man I am because I have a wife who leans into her vocation. I'm beyond blessed with the many talents God has given me, but it cannot be overstated.
Okay, we got a pretty good. So I'm going to give you the line. First of all, he says some of you will go on to lead successful careers in the world. Like, he's not saying you should stay home mm-hmm. and have babies and love your husband and do nothing else. He starts off. That's his thing. Basically, what he's saying is that nothing compares to your children and the woman you marry in your marriage. Basically, that's more important than anything. And I think if you asked any woman who has children, had a career, and my wife has had an executive's career, but our family and the kids, that's number one. But what I find is they went insane. The Democrats went insane over this, and the media, who are kind of the mainstream media, they're kind of one and the same in a way today. But they went crazy on that. It's not like stuff you go crazy over is fentanyl and crime and wars and an open border. That's something to really go crazy about. But an NFL kicker saying your marriage or kids are better than being some corporate drone, like. And when I say that insulting corporate drone, I kind of mean it. Yes, I do mean it. But there was another thing he did, and I probably cut the tape off too quick, but you're going to enjoy this. The kicker, he also went on to mock Biden, who is always proclaiming his Catholic faith, right? The guy loves to proclaim what a great Catholic he is. But he was at an abortion event, and the kicker brings this up. He's at an abortion event, and there's some woman there, and it's a rally or whatever, and the woman has the microphone, and she starts talking about how many weeks you should be, like whatever it is. And it's irrelevant what she's saying. She's talking about abortion. But what is so odd and weird, and I want to know if you know this, Joe on camera standing there, as she talks about the weeks when you should be able to have an abortion, Joe starts blessing himself.
No, I don't.
Yes, this just happened a couple of weeks ago.
Right.
So he's blessing himself. So people are like,
Why?
why? Like, is he blessing them? Who knows? I don't even want to figure it out because it's so creepy. Because I assume when you do in the name of the cross, you're kind of calling on the Lord Jesus Christ to come into your life. I don't know. Like, it's just out of place. And forget about the abortion argument, what you believe in. It's a complicated subject. We're not going there. But the fact that he made the sign of the cross kind of reminds me of when he was looking at his watch when those 13 young soldiers came back dead from Afghanistan. Like, you know, he didn't look at it once. Numerous times as the caskets are coming in and the parents are pissed, he keeps looking at his watch. Now, is that because his brain is always a little bit foggy or is it a nervous tick? Just some of these actions. And let's say we just blame it on the brain. If you're doing that, you shouldn't be president.
No.
If you're looking at your watch when young military service personnel are coming back, you're an inconsiderate. You're not a commander in chief.
If you're a 10-year-old, you know not to do that.
You know, that's right. If you would know not to do that. So anyway, he attacked him for that. The kicker did. Like, he brought up that story. Like, you know, that was very, you know, disrespectful, pathetic.
Right.
Or maybe they're my words. I don't know what the kicker's words.
Right.
I don't want to he's in enough trouble.
Right.
I don't want to. I don't want to put any words in his mouth. But anyway, it became a national story. And, you know, some people will come back to you and say, oh, well, Kaepernick, you know, just when he was kneeling, you know, that became a national story, just like the NFL kicker. Big difference. That's another thing. Proportional arguments are important. Kaepernick was kneeling against the American flag in front of millions of TV viewers and thousands in the stands, right? It was like a police brutality thing. I'm not believing in the country because of all this. That was a very public, out there a statement, getting other players to do it. This guy's just giving one commencement, as we said, in a very small, unknown Catholic college out in the middle of Kansas. So don't give me that argument. You know, I've heard some people kind of bring that up.
It seemed like a fake argument too. Like, it seemed like they had to find something to pick. Like, who can argue with like a mother's job being the mother being the most important thing? Of course, it's more important than work. I mean, you work so you could support your family.
Yes,
so
exactly.
I don't get it.
Yeah,
like, of course.
And he's not saying every woman needs to like live, you know, below the poverty line to raise their kids. Right. No one's saying that.
Right.
He was just saying, basically, he was saying, you know, compared to the corporate woman and all that thing, you can have it all and whatever. He's saying, like, he was just saying, this is the most important thing. If you believe in God and if you have a faith, this is the crux. This is the most important.
And that you can't do that you're not supposed to do the other. See, he's not saying that.
No.
You can have both. But that's why I thought it was kind of a fake.
Yeah, but
on their side.
Yeah, but it got a lot of legs, a lot of energy.
Yeah.
They were demanding that he be thrown off the team. Then they start making all
and
their
they got to
demands.
get comments from their different, you know,
from the different players.
Yeah.
Well, I might not agree with, but I like him and whatever.
Yeah.
Just, you know what you should have said? And this was the quarterback who's actually Mahomes. He's unbelievable. Just come up in there and say, this is nonsense.
Yeah.
This is not. The guy has an opinion, and he, quite frankly, I would have liked someone to say, "Yeah, and I agree with him." Now let's move on. My wife's taking care of my kids, and I'm very happy. I would have liked that better, but they all got to play the game too. But part of this show is we're going to get into about not playing the game. The problem in our society is too many people on the other side have been too willing to play the game. Mostly the elites. They don't want to upset the other elites on the other side, because they got too much cash flow. They go to the same clubs. They send their kids to the same private schools. And I'm talking about Republicans. Mm-hmm. And they've, for decades now, they were kind of in on the gravy train, and they'll play along because their social status, cultural status is so important to them. I could do a whole show on that, but I'm going to tell you know what? I'm going to give you a positive, though. So the best commencement speech I ever heard was at a Catholic high school. And the old priest comes out, and he was very old. And he says to the kids, he says, and he looks out into the audience, and he says, you know, I want you to know you know, all of you are not going to go out there and make millions of dollars and become great poets or authors or movie stars or businessmen or hedge fund managers or start big social media companies. That's not going to happen. It's not the way the world works. Most of you will not get that. So basically, now someone would say, well, that's a negative. No, that's honesty. Like he's telling them, because most can, you know, because then there's the other side. You got Joe Biden tearing you down. Then you got the other side, people just blowing smoke up your butt, telling you how great you're going to be. So this priest comes out to tell the kids, like, life doesn't work that way. It's not all going to be great. It's going to be difficult. It'll be hard. You won't get what you want. You might end up in a career you don't like. He doesn't even go into a lot of detail. He just named those few things I just named. But he says, if you want a very good life and you'll have a happy life, this is all you have to do. He goes, tell the truth. Tell the truth. And I was like, oh, and I've sat through quite a few of these commencement speeches and I've listened to them. And there are good ones out there, but this one didn't last long because it was tell the truth. And I'll take it a step further. And I don't remember if he did or not. But when he was saying tell the truth, he was saying tell the truth in life. Yeah. But he was also telling the kids, tell the truth to yourself.
Sure.
Because you can go down so many wrong paths by kidding yourself that this is the right thing when you know it's not the right path you should go on, that you've been influenced or your parents wanted you to do something. So his tell the truth, and I actually believed he was combining both of them. Tell the truth to the world, be honest, and tell the truth to yourself. Best commencement I ever heard.
Yeah,
that's pretty good, right?
Yeah, it is pretty good.
Very good, very good. So we're gonna spend a little bit time now, and I don't want, because we got a lot of bigger fish to fry. But let's talk about the campus stuff. You know, the Israel, Hamas, Palestine. What I found interesting about how the campus is handled, especially at these elite institutions, is prior to these Israel campus protests and kind of scaring the Jewish students on campus and being very aggressive, if you mislabeled a gender or were culturally insensitive, you had some type of themed party, or you flew a Confederate flag, you badmouthed affirmative action, very...
And now you had a toga party.
Yeah, anything that could be, well, that could be sexual or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
These administrators would tear your 19-year-old ass apart. They would come after you. But then all of a sudden when this came, college administrators were, well, we have to balance these free speech activities. Free speech with these activities. We got to now find the balance. Meanwhile, you brought alcohol into the thing, or you had with all the things we just listed. They were all over you. But all of a sudden, this one, which seemed aggressive, violent, bigoted, whatever bad word you could say about some of these things on campus, they were all a big free speech advocate. So I think that is an important part of what went on.
Oh, yeah.
But I think it's bigger than it was Israel and Gaza and Palestine. I think it's bigger than that. And a lot of people don't pick this up. And some people say, well, you're a conspiracy theorist or you're crazy. But these are bigger than just college kids. First of all, a lot of them arrested on campus weren't even from the college.
Right.
They had solar tents all of a sudden showing up on campus. I heard they're expensive. They all have the kaifa, I'm not even the Palestinian headdress. Mm-hmm. Like there was tons of those. Although where do they all come from? Mm-hmm. They had supplies coming in. That's because it's bigger than just college kids. And that's why we shouldn't condemn all these college kids in the sense that a lot of this is promoted by these big neo-communist movements. And I label them neo-communist, leftist movements, like Code Pinks, Antifas, and Black Lives. They don't just spring up. There are these, and there's many more than I just named. These are big, well-funded organizations that come in from, you don't know what Chinese money's coming in. You don't know where all these sources. We all hear Soros, but it's far more complicated than just George Soros.
Yeah. Yep.
These are really bring down America at any cost. And I would even say these are anti-white protests, they're anti-American, they're anti-Judeo-Christian, they're anti-family, they're anti-history, these same people that pull down statues. So to say that all this was just about Israel and Palestine, no, that was the flavor of the day. And I'm not discounting them, not saying they were awful. If you were a Jewish student on that campus and you were hearing some of the chants from the river to the sea and all that, or global infantata, that means like kill Jews everywhere. Yeah. Like it was really out of control. But but there were still small numbers of college kids participating in that. And I think sometimes we're a little too quick to act like every college kid was involved in that. And even some of them who were involved, they don't even know what the river to the sea is. That means Israel's got to go, right? That's completely, they don't know it's the Mediterranean and the Jordan River. They're just saying it. Right. They don't really understand that has been chanted for a long time, or the blood on the hands. I could go into the story where that came from. It's an awful story. But what are your feelings on that?
Yeah, I think, first of all, how unfair it is. How if you come from a different perspective, you're pigeonholed. You can't do anything. You can't demonstrate in any way. And that they let these demonstrations go crazy. Right. And where's the proportionality? Where's the fairness? In one side can say what they want, and another side can do the same thing. It's not there. No, it's not there. And you're seeing that in Europe, like pro-British people come out and the cops are like, you got to go. Yeah. We're having a different type of march here for the Islamic whatever. You got to go because you could provoke people. It's more clamping down on free speech. They promote what they want and do what they want, but you can't say what you want. Yeah, it's I'll even say this. I think a lot of younger people, because I know a lot of older people with these issues, they can't manage themselves. And when you can't manage yourselves, you can't master yourself. And you got all these issues. A lot of those type of people go out to try to master these giant problems in the world. Mm-hmm. And that would be like fixing the Israeli-Palestinian thing. But why this was bigger than just college kids? It was bigger than just college kids because it used to be a two-state solution, but what you were seeing on campus, it wasn't give back the hostages, and then then have a peace settlement, or it was no more two-state solution. It was like they gotta go. That was like Israel has to go. We haven't seen that before, because that bigger movement I'm talking about, this anti-communist, anti-Christian, anti-whatever, it's a lot bigger than what's just going on those campuses. Who did it the best? Who handled it the best was the University of Florida. University of Florida, they just put out a list of what you could do and what you couldn't do, and then they had no problems. Right. And I know a lot of other schools who moved really quick, even some liberal colleges up in Boston. The state police came in right before graduation. They were out there for 3 hours. Like, you're all out of here. Right. We're not going there. We just saw what happened. You're all out of here. But here's what the University of Florida, I'm sure DeSantis had something to do with this, because the state universities are run by the government. Mm-hmm. And people are thinking they're not independent universities. Right. They're funded by the taxpayer, and the taxpayer doesn't want to see this. So some of the allowable activities were speech, expressing viewpoints. You could do that. Holding signs in your hand, not putting them on walls or whatever. This was what was prohibitive. No amplified sound, no demonstrations inside buildings, no littering, no sleeping, no unmanned sign, no blocking ingress or egress, no building of structures, sleeping bags, pillows. This is what wasn't allowed. No disruption, no threats,
No violence, no weapons. And this was the biggest part that the University of Florida put out. Here are the consequences. If you are a student and you do any of those things above, you will receive a 3-year trespass and suspension. 3-year suspension and a trespass charge.
Right.
This is even better because a lot of this is the faculty and the administrators, right? Employees will be trespassed and separated from employment. So if you're an administrator or a faculty member at the University of Florida, that list I just read out, if you violate it, they printed these, they put them all over Florida. What's the kid going to say? Like, even if a kid wants to get into a cause,
Right.
he's like, I don't care that much
Right.
to ruin my career. And so that's what Florida did.
Well, and the fact is you can still demonstrate. You can still get your voice out there. You just can't disrupt everything.
Yeah. You don't, and that's not protest. Protest has to be organized, and you cannot be getting in the way of other people to ruin their lives. So they put it out. They did it really well. And I also want to point out that the kids that were protesting against Vietnam in the colleges back in the 60s into the 70s, back then, even some of that might have had foreign influence. Who knows what other countries were doing? But we have a global world now, and bad actors are all pushing certain things in this country that we don't want pushed. And a lot of people actually live here and are Americans who want to push the same stuff. The difference with the kids in Vietnam back in the 60s and 70s, in their neighborhoods, their brothers went to the war, might have not come back. They came back wounded, or they came back with real shell-shocked. I'm using PTSD. That's really what I wanted to say. Or their cousin was killed in Vietnam. Or the neighborhood guys would come back to the neighborhood and say, don't go to that war. It's bad. That happened a lot too. Like in working class neighborhoods, guys would come back from Vietnam. They didn't do that in World War II, obviously. I don't even think they did it in Korea. They were like, don't go there. So when these kids on those campuses back in the 60s and 70s, they had skin in the game.
Mm-hmm. These
kids at these privileged colleges, they don't have any skin in the game. Mm-hmm. So I like if you're like, when I've heard people try to say, oh, well, they were allowed. No, totally different, a different time and a different motivation. Theirs was not a little more, theirs was authentic. I truly believe that about the Vietnam War. Though there were some bad things they did too, mistreating people and stuff like that. They're not completely off the hook. No one's ever let completely off the hook. Nope. But there's no comparison to what you just saw with that. But anyway, we're going to be right back, and we're going to go into a deeper college discussion. We're going to move off the Hamas-Palestine thing, and we're going to make it a little more personal about what we know about college campuses back in the day and what do we know about now. So we'll be right back. Hey, welcome back to the Old Gravy Podcast. I'm here with King George, and we're really fixing. We're settling the score for everything. Right? We're just so brilliant.
Yeah.
But anyway, we're going to move off the college campuses and the Hamas, Palestine, Israel thing, and we're going to make it a little more local. And I want to talk about what I think has gone on college campuses over the last 3 or 4 decades, and it just keeps getting worse. I think fraternities were targeted by colleges and universities because the fraternities were their own corporations. They were their own houses, their own property. It didn't go on as much in southern states where there's a big fraternity system. But we'll speak because we're both from North. We went to school in the Northeast, and we know a lot of these Northeast institutions where we've had a lot of friends. But I think there was a concerted effort by administrators and faculty to a certain extent, but administrators. There's some colleges that have more administrators than students. Never mind faculty. These things are giant bureaucracies that you would not believe. But they wanted the fraternities, because if all institutions, like the federal government, the bigger they get, the more they want. And anything that could be a little bit of a threat to to their power, not a threat to fraternities doing too much hazing or harassing or whatever it is. But if they can't control it, like any institution, they're insatiable. And I think there was a concerted PR war that fraternities were sexist, dangerous hellholes. Mm-hmm. And And I'll give you an example. The Duke fake rape charge in 2006. All of Duke's faculty was all over that, all supported, administration. That fake Rolling Stone story that came out in 2014, there was a gang rape at the University of Virginia, all made up. All made up. This was, I'm not saying they made it up. I'm saying, but when they have something, even if they don't believe it or they want to believe it,
they grasp onto it. That's their story. That fulfills their narrative.
That fulfills their narrative, and the narrative is to get the power. So if that's going to help them destroy the fraternity system in the country, at the college and university level, that's what they're going to do. There was there was a war against men on college campuses. You know, a perfect example: the Department of Education in 2011. I assume this had to be under Obama. They gave the schools the power to hold sexual misconduct trials. That is not held in a that's not due process. That's the police, the detectives, and laws that have been put on the books that you're protected under the Constitution, there's so many laws there. And they're like, you know what? We're going to take care of it ourselves here. And they've ruined a lot of reputations. And once you went through that process, they destroyed you, threw you out, and you were gone. That's not how America works, and it shouldn't have worked. Matter of fact, Title IX or whatever, Biden was very involved in that as the vice president. If they used what they would say the amount of evidence that woman Tara Reade accused him of, and I'm not saying it's true or not true or whatever, if he had to go under the Title IX rules, he wouldn't be president today for the Tara Reade thing, because that's not due process.
Is that still going on?
Well, you know what? Betsy DeVos or whatever came in, and she kind of under Trump and kind of pushed back on a lot of it. Yeah. But believe me, it's all coming back. It's really all coming back. And listen, frat house has had some issues. There's no doubt about it. We were in a fraternity together. But this is one thing it had that colleges don't teach you. We had to run a government in the house. We had to have people run the maintenance of the house. We had to run our own dining facilities. We had to pay bills. We ran an organization there. You don't get any of that in college. Now they just want to put you into dorms or let you go up and live in apartments. But you learn public speaking in the house. If you ran an office in the house, you had to speak to 50 guys who didn't want to listen.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Exactly. How difficult that was? Yep. You being one of the guys never listening, by the way. But like that's a big thing that these fraternities lost. Yeah. And let me tell you, today back at our small liberal arts college in Pennsylvania, when you have a party, they send like a hired hand in there to check bands. You're only allowed to have beer. You are controlled like veal on these campuses now. Yeah. It's very upsetting. And I actually think the time is now the time to push back on these administrations. Basically, a lot of people are sick of what they saw. And I'm not talking about all the top elite schools. I'm talking about all these liberal arts colleges throughout the Northeast and the Midwest. They are within 2 years, 700,000 less kids will be applying to college based on demographics, just birth rates. Amazing. And look how much that compounds. 700 the first year, now it's 1.4 now, and that's the trend. So they're desperate for students, right? So my thing is, you could leverage this. Yeah. But no one's telling kids to do this, or their parents, or the board of trustees or faculty that believe this is the time to stand up to these big bureaucracies, these big institutions. You have leverage now. You know, if you want more free market courses, you want due process, none of these kangaroo courts in school. One of them got me, actually threw me out. I don't want to talk about that, but they brought me back. If you want certain people to give lectures there, if you want diversity in hiring, in thought, most of these faculty members are of the left. Right. So do you think this is the best time? If you were going to fight this fight.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is the time.
Where they're losing power. They've had power. They've had the government constantly funding, being able to add administration. Well, now they're going to have to cut back.
Yeah.
And now some schools are going to close, and they're going to have to truly compete. So yes,
Yeah.
now's the time.
Now's the time. Now's the time to do it. This is the time when your enemy is weak, you go after them. And I would look at them as an enemy because they've taken so much control. And I'll even say this, all these different clubs based on gender and ethnicity, like the African American club, the Hispanic club, the Asian club, the LGBTQT club, this club, that club, football and the art club, they don't care what color you are. But what they've done at these colleges, especially these small schools, they built silos.
Yes.
And everybody goes into their silo and doesn't come out. They hang out in their silo. They hang out in this silo over here.
The one silo that they didn't want were fraternities because they looked at that as white men. We got to break that silo.
Yeah, but you're absolutely right. That silo had to be blown up, and we're going to give you all these other silos, which we control. Yeah. That really went on, and what they should have, that's why you can't give in to this. And I'm going to play a tape at the end of the show of a guy who doesn't give in. And it's not only about colleges, it's about politics and everything. And we're going to close the show with his tape. I'm not ready to do it yet. But I want to tell a story that happened at our college. And let me just tell you, I love that institution. Yeah. I mean, it was so good to me. It was very good to you.
Yep.
But they have to be careful because what I'm hearing is they are like any other small liberal arts thing with all this control, all this bureaucracy, they talk diversity all day long, and they don't have any diversity. They talk about it all the time. I don't think the numbers, as much as they talked about it, maybe it went up a little, but as much as they talk about it, it's barely budged. That's my guess. And their marketing is all the same thing. If there's 400 small liberal arts colleges out there, they're all promoting the same thing. Why don't you promote something different?
Right.
Like, why don't you try to recruit working class entrepreneurs whose family are people of color, but they're Brazilian entrepreneurs who have money that can send their kids there. Asian entrepreneurs. Instead of that kind of corporate, suburban, I have a whole marketing plan. I can't roll it out for you now. I'll do it after the show and bore the hell out of you. But let me tell you something that happened at our place, and people could Google this. So there was I don't know if you know this story. In 2019, this highlights what I'm talking about. In 2019, a kid went through a yearbook, right? And he noticed guys in 1980, a few years before us, in Nazi uniforms in a fraternity house drinking beer in a party setting. And the kid brought the book to the administration and said, this is disgusting because this guy is a board of trustee and he's donated the leadership center. Okay? I'm sure our school would be horrified that we're talking about it, but tough luck because we want it to stick around. And if this nonsense keeps going on, we're going to lose it. So this is our call to say, don't do this anymore. And they'll have there's a different opinion on what they did and what they didn't do, and we're going to explore it. So basically, I just left you with that these guys are wearing Nazi uniforms, right? Basically, what was happening at that fraternity that night, there were 2 floors with 2 themes in the frat house. On the first floor was the Dukes of Hazzard television show. Everyone were dressed like the Dukes of Hazzard. On the second floor was Hogan's Heroes. They were dressed as Hogan's Heroes, okay, back in 1980. So now in 2019, this kid complains, and now all these politically correct people are like, well, his name shouldn't be on the leadership building. He's got to go, the mob. So the mob's going to come after this guy for playing at a party dressed as Hogan's Heroes, who most of the stars in Hogan's Heroes, not all of them, were Jewish actors who were mocking the Nazis. That's what that whole show was about. But when you put the context around it is this was a fraternity house having a party, right? So what happens? What do you think happens? So the person who gets accused, what's the first thing he does?
I know what I would do. Say, forget it.
Well, he apologized and resigned. And he had given a ton of money to the school. And then the school comes out and kind of says, because he does it so quick, get a load of this. Right. They say like, well, he kind of did the right thing, right? Mm-hmm. That's not the right thing. Mm-hmm. The right thing is to say, I'm not going anywhere. That was a Hogan's Heroes party.
Right, right.
I was 19 years old. That's a Hogan's Hero. I'm not going anywhere. But the fact that he resigned so quickly, there was so much support from the alumni. But once someone apologizes, you're done. Yeah. No one's coming to your rescue. He would have had he would have had a huge support base come in. But once you apologize, you're done. Who wants to support you? If you're not going to fight for yourself, how can you ask fellow alumni to fight with you? Mm-hmm. At least I would have said to him, even if he panicked, because a lot of people now panic under this, but I think it's changing. I do think it's changing. What I would have said, yeah, you want, because then they would have said, at first they said he did it. If you said, I'm not going to leave, listen, I have nothing to apologize for. I really don't. That was a Hogan's Heroes party. We wore the costumes. Tough luck. If they said, no, you have to go, I would have said, okay, I want every dime I donated to this college, and he donated. And I want that check. I would have blown that check up. You know, like when you win like a sweepstake. Right. And I would have had thousands of Gettysburg alumni standing behind him as he held up his, I don't know, $2 million check. Right. But you got to fight back. That was my bigger point. And he went off into the sunset. He should have never done that. You have to fight back.
And when was this party?
So the party was in 1980. In 2019 is when they...
Almost 40 years later.
Over 40 years later. Wow. And from all accounts, this guy is a gentleman and he's a good man. Why wouldn't he be? He's given tons of money to him because he wore a Hogan's Hero Nazi thing for a party. Come on. Yeah. That really frustrated me. But anyway, this pushing back is important. I guess that's my bigger kind of, you got to push back or they'll eat you alive. Right. And you got to take the hits. They're going to come fast and furious, but it's only going to last for a little bit. Right. You know, because there's so many other big stories.
Then they move on.
Yeah. But if you hold your ground and then you organize your troops, you have to push back. Yeah. And here's a guy, and I'm going to play this audio right now. And this is a guy that a lot of people don't like. I personally admire him. He was a naval officer. He owned a part of the Seinfeld show. He worked at, I think, Goldman Sachs. You know, this guy's a successful guy. He's now considered like a villain of the world because he worked for Donald Trump, and his name is Steve Bannon. But let's hear what Steve Bannon has to say about how you have to deal with these things and how the people who were on our side failed to defend us. So let's listen to the audio.
What the did you do to stop it? Here's what you did to stop it. Nothing. You know why they did nothing? Because it's too hard to do it. They're gutless. The reason this country in the West is in the shape it's in is because the conservatives who talked a good game about doing better didn't have the balls to sit there and fight and say no. This is why you have moms going to school boards to throw this pornography out. The reason we're winning in the United States, we're not depending upon a conservative elite who are gutless and feckless. We're depending upon mothers and fathers and school boards. We're depending upon working class people who are taking their extra time to go to precinct strategy because they said, hey, we're prepared to stand and fight and not let our country be taken. And that's what's important. Everything else is just conversation. You have to have the political will and the muscle to sit there and say, they can call me a racist, they can call me a nativist, they can call me a xenophobe, a sexist, a homophobe, all of it. When they get to that name calling, that means they've lost the argument and we're winning. You've got to draw that pus, you've got to lance the boil and draw that pus out of the system, and the conservatives aren't prepared to do that. They'll curl up in the fetal position because they're not going to be acceptable at the clubs. You have to get over, you have to understand we're unclubbable. And we're unclubbable, and we're fucking proud of it, okay? And we're going to...
Well, let me say this, and I'm not going to make any apologies for Steve Bannon. He just told you what he felt. But the one thing he said is, we're unclubbable. And we talked about that earlier in the broadcast, meaning you have to, so many people go there because of social status economic status, jobs, what weddings you go to, what kids you go to school. And let me tell you, this Bannon is a very wealthy guy, blue collar background. He's the devil in certain circles in this country. But I think some people should listen to what he said, because there's plenty of wisdom in there. Maybe you don't want to be that harsh, that mean, or that in your face, but after they try to put the former president on this kangaroo court in jail, we're going to finish with that. We're going to need a little bit more of this to stop what's going on. So you got me fired up, King.
Yeah.
Bring you on the show. You got me so fired up. I loved having you, and that's what you do. You just set me off, and I can't believe we're wrapping up the show. That went so quick. But anyway, thanks for joining us here at the Old Gravy Podcast. Thanks for having King George.
Great to be here.
Thanks for having you, King, and we'll be back next week with another podcast. Thanks.
Disclaimer. The host assumes no responsibility or liability for any errors or omissions in the content of this podcast. The information contained in this podcast is provided on an as-is basis, with no guarantees of completeness, accuracy, usefulness, or timeliness.